So, Mary Stewart's The Last Enchantment wraps up her Merlin trilogy in a nice little bow, while still leaving room for a fourth book in the series, in her Arthurian series, right? The Wicked Day. But I'm sort of getting ahead of myself. The Last Enchantment, tying off the Merlin's part of the story, uh, it, spoiler alert, features the death and rebirth and the death again of the great enchanter himself. And it also follows his work as a spy for King Arthur and a scholar and an advisor in all things. uh, Mary Stewart covers so many legends in record time and interprets them in interesting ways. In fact, I've learned a thing or two in reading her work, right? Such as like the odd stories where like it says that King Arthur had a first wife before Guinevere, whose name was also Guinevere. Only this Guinevere was like sweet and gentle and died in childbirth, um, and sort of suffers from the oh, she was so perfect and too good for this world. How can anyone compare syndrome? That, well, I imagine it isn't all that uncommon in the case of dead spouses. Although it might explain it might cause a bit of jealousy in regard to the new Guinevere 2. Um, but in any case, at the time of this recording, I am over halfway through with The Wicked Day. So, yeah, I, I do have an idea of where things are going, right? And seeds that are planted in this book to are growing tall and strong in book 4. So we've got Merlin running around doing his sort of wheeling and dealing and doing his disguises, and he's pretending to be an eye doctor or a harpist, and he spies on Morgause and her sons, right? You get the drill. Mordred has been born by this point, and Morgause has set up this scheme to hide Mordred's presence from Merlin and Arthur. She instigates this all-out massacre of newborn children, claiming that Mordred was amongst them, and thus convincing everyone that Mordred is dead, right? He's no threat to anyone. Only Merlin isn't convinced, and he's still looking for the boy. So later, Morgause poisons Merlin, which drives him, for lack of a better word, crazy. He's sick, screaming, and he runs off into the forest um, for months, actually, where he's like rambling and not making any sense, and he's out of it, and he only finds help after walking onto a battlefield where some of Arthur's guys are hanging out. And they take care of him and eventually bring him back to the king and get that whole mess sorted out. This covers that weird legend about Merlin, the wild man of the forest, uh, a legend which might or might not, historically speaking, be grounded in any sort of history. And even if it is, it might not even be the same Merlin as Mirden the Welsh bard, right? That we all know and love, who was the direct inspiration for Merlin as a fictional character, shall we say. Again, it's the oh so confusing Arthurian legend we're talking about, right? It's basically a pick and mix at this point. And Mary Stuart, thank goodness, is picking a lot of great things to write about and dramatize. There's the legend of the abduction of Guinevere by the king of the Summer Country. And in that story, Lancelot goes to rescue her. In this case, the role of Lancelot is being played by Bedivere, uh, because Mary Stuart has this issue of Lancelot being demonstrably fictitious, and I don't think she likes him all that much in any case. But Bedivere, filling that role, does rescue Guinevere and bring her back to Camelot, and everything's mostly fine again. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't realize Bedivere was going to be filling that Lancelot role until very late in the story, actually. I, I honestly thought, and please bear with me, that Bedivere was gay. Because Stewart mentioned time and time again how faithful Bedivere was to Arthur, and how his love for him knew no bounds, and how there's a feast where everyone's staring at beautiful Guinevere, except for Bedivere, who's staring at Arthur. And I thought, oh yeah, well that might be a hint that she's doing something interesting there. She was doing something interesting there, but not what I thought. It turns out that he's not gay. He's just good at hiding the fact that he's in love with his best friend's wife, which I imagine you'd have to be pretty good at. Um, Merlin eventually he's off doing his thing while all this is going on, right? And eventually Merlin sort of settles down outside of Camelot, and he takes on an apprentice. That would be, at first glance, a boy called Ninian, who turns out to be Vivian slash Ninian slash Nimue in disguise. Nimue, the Lady of the Lake. It's a whole thing, and Stewart could have made it a bit less confusing, I think. But I think she wanted to throw another handful of legends into the mix before the story was out. So, yeah. But when Merlin realizes that Nimue is Nimue, he sort of sees her in a different light. He falls in love with her, and he gives up his powers to her, following the old myth and legend, of course. Although in this case, she actually loves him back and is sort of reluctant to take his power to a certain extent. They travel together and they have a nice time, uh, only for Merlin to get sick and, spoiler, for a 1,000-year-old legend, he dies. Only he doesn't die. He falls into a coma, which, with everyone's medieval knowledge of medicine, only resembles death. He awakens to find himself buried alive within the crystal cave, the front entrance blocked off, and he's forced to survive off the medicines and supplies that he left in his last visit to the cave. Right? He bides his time, and he is just waiting in there. And eventually, a thief breaks in to the cave to rob it, and Merlin scares him off, doing the spooky ghost act, and after a few more shenanigans, he manages to escape his burial by using the path that the thief opened up for him. He's out in the world again, and there he learns that Nimue has ascended to be one of Arthur's chief counselors, having learnt all of Merlin's magic, right, and secrets and all that. And Arthur is making plans to act against Morgause and her children, because Mordred, as it turns out, has appeared again, and Morgause is no doubt planning to make good use of him against his uncle father. Um, Merlin, seeing all this around him, sort of realizes that the gods have given him a chance to, shall we say, go gently into that good night. He realizes that he can pass now, watchful from the world, without this showy display of power or needing to aid Arthur anymore. He can sit back and wait and observe. His time was past, and the horrific prophecy of him being buried alive has already come to pass, and it's gone now, and he can sort of sit back contented and let nature take its course. So Merlin fades from the public eye. He fades from the world, this brilliant bastard that he is. And he leaves Britain to Arthur, right? He leaves the fate of the world to this boy who he's raised since childhood. And thus the legend grows, right, of Merlin being everywhere and nowhere, right? They really only know that he came back again and then sort of disappeared again, right? A dream to some and a nightmare to others, if you will. Uh, and such is Mary Stuart's writing, is that she's able to end the career of the great enchanter who survived death more times than can be counted, and who's just such a genius character in so many ways. With this, she leaves him with this slow, quiet, thoughtful, uh, thoughtful ending, right? Where even the beginning of this book is very, very high energy, and there's monumentous things going on, and now it's quiet and slow, and Merlin sort of sits back and dreams of the stars and he drifts off. And it's a great way to end it, really. It's the only way to end it. What with so many legends of Merlin being what they are. But obviously there's still more to come. There's Mordred and Morgause and Morgan le Fay. There's Sir Gawain and Agravain and Gaheris, and among others, right? There's so much more to write about, which brings us to The Wicked Day, Book 4, and sort of the end to her Arthurian series. Yeah, I'll see you then.